Okay, so, I was just reading something and it really got me thinking.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
It was a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt about her husband, Franklin.
Oh, wow.
She said, "My husband doesn't think he decides."
Huh.
And it just struck me, because we talk so much about like the ability to think, like raw brain power.
Right, right.
But maybe we don't focus enough on whether we're actually choosing to use that ability in our everyday lives.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I love that quote.
Yeah, and it really sets the stage for what we're going to dive into today.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of gets to the heart of this whole discussion, doesn't it? This idea that there's more to intelligence than just like, how smart you are on paper.
Right.
It makes me think about this really fascinating area of research that goes beyond just traditional measures of intelligence like IQ tests and all that.
Right, we're talking about intelligence in the wild.
Yeah, exactly. Intelligence in the wild. It's a great term.
Which is very different from, what we typically think of when we hear the word intelligence.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to unpack this idea that how we use our smarts in the real world.
Yeah.
The messy, unpredictable real world isn't just about those abilities themselves.
Right.
It's also heavily influenced by what researchers call our thinking dispositions.
Yeah, our tendencies, our inclinations towards certain ways of thinking.
Exactly.
And to help us really explore this topic, we're going to be drawing on this really insightful research paper called Intelligence in the Wild, a dispositional view of intellectual traits
Right.
by David Perkins and his colleagues, published back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And this paper just does such a good job of challenging that traditional view that intelligence is just about abilities.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
It does.
So our mission for you today, the listener, is to understand why simply having intellectual horsepower isn't the whole story.
Yeah, it's not enough, right?
It's not enough. We want to delve into how these thinking dispositions play a crucial role and how intelligently we navigate our everyday lives.
Yeah, and how they impact our decisions,
Yeah.
our problem-solving, everything.
So to kick things off, let's think about how we've traditionally viewed intelligence.
Okay.
For so long, the focus has been on things like IQ scores,
Mm-hmm.
cognitive processes, specific thinking strategies that we learn.
Right. The things you're kind of equipped with the tools in your toolbox.
It's all about what a person is equipped to do intellectually.
Absolutely.
But as we've kind of hinted at already, it's not that straightforward.
No, not at all.
Because when you step outside of that controlled environment of a classroom or a test, and you enter what Perkins and his colleagues call the wilderness of everyday life, things get a lot more complicated.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, isn't it? The wilderness versus the classroom.
Yeah, because out in the wilderness, the challenges, they're not neatly defined. You're not told exactly what to do.
Right. In the lab, you're given a very specific problem, and you know exactly what you need to do to solve it.
Right.
But in the real world, it's, like you said, messy and unpredictable.
Exactly. You have to figure out what the problem even is sometimes.
Right. And then you have to decide, is this even worth my time and energy?
Exactly. And those opportunities to really engage your intelligence, they're often subtle. You might not even notice them.
Yeah. And even when you do notice them, it's a choice.
Yeah.
Do I want to engage with this problem? Do I want to put in the effort?
And that's where these thinking dispositions come in.
Exactly. They bridge that gap between having the ability to think in certain ways and actually using that ability in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between, can you solve a math problem in your head?
Right.
And will you actually stop and calculate the tip at a restaurant?
Right. Or are you just going to ballpark it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or will you take the time to research different options before making a big purchase?
Mm-hmm. Are you curious enough to even consider those other options?
Right. So we're talking about things like curiosity, open-mindedness, skepticism.
Yeah.
Are you naturally inclined to question things, to look for evidence?
These are more like ingrained tendencies.
They are. They really are.
Than just skills you can pick up.
Right. It's part of who you are, how you approach the world.
So to help us unpack these dispositions a little bit further, Perkins and his colleagues developed this framework called the triadic model.
Yeah, the triadic model, which I think is so helpful.
Okay, so let's break down the triadic model.
All right.
It basically says that a thinking disposition is made up of three key components.
Yep.
Ability, inclination, and sensitivity.
That's right.
So it's not just about having the ability to do something right.
No, it's not just about can you do it?
There's more to it.
There's more to it.
You also need the inclination.
Right, the motivation, the desire to actually do it.
And then the sensitivity.
Which is the awareness of when it's appropriate to use that ability.
Right, recognizing the opportunity.
Exactly.
So can you give us an example of how these three components work together?
Absolutely. So let's take open-mindedness,
Okay.
which we've already touched on a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
To be truly open-minded, In a given situation, you first need the ability to see things from more than one perspective.
Okay, so to understand that there can be different valid viewpoints.
Right, that's the ability part.
Okay.
But then you need the inclination, the motivation to actually consider those alternative perspectives.
Even if they challenge your own,
Exactly, even if they make you uncomfortable.
you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone.
You do.
Hmm.
And then you need the sensitivity.
To recognize when a situation actually calls for open-mindedness.
Right, to say, okay, maybe there's more to this than I initially thought.
Yeah, to notice that maybe you need to pause and consider other possibilities.
Exactly. And, sometimes that's not easy,
Right.
especially if you're, in a rush or feeling stressed.
Yeah, or if you're just used to seeing things a certain way.
Right, we can get stuck in our own little bubbles.
So it's not enough to just be able to see other viewpoints.
No,
You have to want to and also recognize when it's important to do so.
that's a great way to put it.
And it's interesting that this model includes ability as a component. Because, in everyday language, we often think of abilities and dispositions as separate things.
That's true. We might say, oh, she's so smart, but she just doesn't have the disposition to, stick with things when they get tough.
Yeah, or he's a brilliant artist, but he lacks the disposition to be organized.
Right, right. But the triadic model reframes this by saying that those dispositions actually require ability as well.
Okay, so it's like a more nuanced view.
It's saying that ability is a necessary ingredient, but it's not the whole story.
So, for example, the disposition to persevere when things get tough
Right.
requires not only the ability to problem solve,
Which, you might get from good education, good teachers.
but also the inclination to keep trying even when it's hard.
Yeah, that grit, that determination.
And the sensitivity to recognize that, okay, this is a situation where perseverance will actually pay off.
Right, and that sensitivity can come from experience.
Yeah, from seeing the long-term benefits of sticking with something.
So it's like a combination of nature and nurture. Your natural inclinations plus the experiences that shape you.
It really is a fascinating way to look at intelligence.
It's a much richer view than just focusing on IQ or test scores.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so how did the researchers actually go about testing this model?
Well, they designed a really clever research paradigm involving a series of tasks that were given to students.
Okay.
The idea was to try to isolate and measure each of those three components.
Ability, inclination, and sensitivity
Right.
for specific thinking dispositions.
Exactly.
Okay, so what kind of tasks did they use?
In one of their studies, they focused on 8th grade students,
Okay.
and they looked at two specific thinking dispositions.
Okay.
One was the disposition to seek alternative options,
Okay.
and the other was the disposition to seek reasons on both sides of an issue.
Got it.
So basically, are you thinking broadly and are you considering all sides?
Makes sense.
And they gave these students short stories that had little shortcomings embedded in them in the character's thinking.
Okay, so the characters in the stories were making decisions or solving problems, but they weren't doing it in the most thoughtful way.
Exactly. They were kind of falling short in those two specific dispositions.
Got it.
And then the researchers had different tasks to measure the students' sensitivity, inclination, and ability.
Okay, so break that down for us. How did they measure sensitivity?
So the first task was all about sensitivity.
Okay.
The students had to read the stories
Uh-huh.
and actually underline any passages where they noticed a flaw in the character's thinking.
Oh, so they had to spot the problem themselves?
They did, and then they had to explain what the problem was.
Okay, so that tested whether they were sensitive to the lack of alternative options or, the failure to consider both sides.
Exactly.
Okay, and then how did they measure inclination?
So for inclination, they basically took out the sensitivity part.
Okay.
They actually highlighted the problematic part of the story for the students.
Oh, so they didn't have to find it themselves this time.
Right.
Okay.
And then they asked the students if they saw it as a problem and how they would address it.
So this was more about whether they were motivated to engage in that type of thinking once the problem was pointed out to them.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about ability?
For ability, they really isolated the target thinking skill from the story.
Okay.
So for example, in a story where a character didn't consider other choices, they would just directly ask the students to list several alternative options.
Okay, so they took out the story context entirely?
Yeah, they just wanted to see if the students could generate those options on their own without having to recognize the need for them in this story.
Makes sense. That's a really clever way to separate those different components.
It is.
So what did they find in this first study with the 8th graders?
Well, one of the most surprising findings was just how low the students' sensitivity to those thinking shortfalls was.
Oh, wow. So even though they had the ability to think more broadly, they weren't necessarily picking up on those opportunities.
That's right. For example, with a disposition to seek alternative options on average, the students only demonstrated about 13.5% of what they were capable of doing just because they didn't notice the need to in the story.
That's a huge gap.
It is.
So they had the capacity to come up with more options,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't recognizing that they needed to.
Yeah, it's like they had the tools, but they didn't know when to use them.
That's a really important takeaway for our listeners.
It is.
It's not just about having the ability,
Mm,
it's about developing the awareness to recognize when to use it.
exactly.
So sensitivity might be even more important than ability in some cases.
That's what the research seems to suggest.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening.
And what about inclination? Did they see a similar pattern there?
Well, for inclination, the students performed much better when the problem was pointed out to them.
Okay.
They demonstrated about 45% of their ability in those tasks.
Okay, so still not 100%.
Right. But it was a significant improvement over the sensitivity tasks.
So it seems like that hurdle of just noticing when more thoughtful engagement is needed,
Yeah,
that might be a bigger barrier than a lack of motivation.
it could be.
That's really interesting because, we often assume that if someone isn't thinking well, it's because they can't or they don't want to.
Right. We think they're either lazy or they're just not smart enough.
But this suggests that maybe they're just not seeing the need.
Exactly. Maybe they're just not tuned in to those opportunities.
And that has big implications for how we approach education, how we approach personal growth.
It does, because if we can teach people to be more sensitive to those opportunities,
Yep.
then they can start to use their abilities more effectively.
So we need to cultivate that awareness.
Absolutely.
That's a really important takeaway.
It is, and it's something that we could all work on.
Okay, so what about the other studies they did?
Yeah, so in their second study, they streamlined things a bit.
Okay.
They focused on sixth graders this time.
Okay, younger group.
Yeah, and they actually omitted the inclination task altogether.
Based on the findings from the first study.
Right, because that first study really highlighted sensitivity as being the major bottleneck.
Yeah, that was the bigger issue.
So they wanted to focus on that in the second study.
Okay, so how did they measure sensitivity and ability in this study?
Well, instead of just counting, how many problems the students correctly identified,
Mm-hmm.
they actually used holistic ratings of the students' responses.
Okay.
So they looked at the thoughtfulness, the elaboration, the quality of the explanations.
Okay, so a more qualitative approach.
Exactly.
And what did they find with this younger group?
Well, first of all, they found that their measures of sensitivity and ability were very consistent.
Okay, so they're reliable measures.
Yeah.
Huh.
And their analysis suggested that even though they were looking at two different types of thinking dispositions,
Right.
there was still a single underlying factor for sensitivity and another for ability.
Okay, so sensitivity and ability were distinct constructs.
They were. But the most interesting finding was what they called the dispositions effect.
The dispositions effect. Okay, tell us about that.
So what they found was that a large majority of these sixth graders,
Mm-hmm.
they had the underlying ability to perform well on the tasks,
Okay.
but they often failed to actually detect and respond to the thinking shortfalls independently.
When they were presented in the context of the story.
Right.
So again, it wasn't that they weren't smart enough.
No.
It was that they weren't recognizing the need to use their smarts.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
they had the ingredients, but they weren't following the recipe.
That's a great analogy. And did they find any relationship between ability and sensitivity in this study?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
They found a correlation.
Okay.
Generally, as a student's ability level increased, their sensitivity also tended to be better.
That makes sense. The more tools you have, the more likely you are to know when to use them.
Right. But even the students with higher ability still showed room for improvement in their sensitivity.
So even if you're really smart, you can still get better at recognizing those opportunities to think more deeply. It's an ongoing process.
It is. It's a skill that we can develop over time.
Okay, so what about their third study? What did they focus on there?
So in the third study, they wanted to delve deeper into this issue of sensitivity.
Okay.
And specifically, they wanted to explore why people fail to detect thinking shortfalls.
Okay, so why aren't people noticing these opportunities to think more carefully?
Right. They had a few hypotheses.
Okay.
Maybe it's a lack of knowledge.
Okay, so they just don't know what to look for.
Right. Or maybe people just aren't alert to these kind of issues.
Okay, so they're not paying attention.
Yeah. Or it could be that the shortfalls are inherently difficult to spot.
Okay, so it's not them, it's the task.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did they go about testing these different possibilities?
Well, they used stories, again,
Okay.
similar to the first two studies,
Hmm.
but they introduced two key manipulations.
Okay.
Saliency and priming.
Saliency and priming.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did they do for saliency?
For saliency, they literally underlined the thinking shortfalls in the stories.
Oh, wow. So they made them super obvious.
They did. The idea was that if lack of detection is the main problem,
Right.
then making those shortfalls really obvious should help.
Okay. And what about priming?
So for priming, they gave some of the students a little crib sheet
Okay.
with 5 numbered prompts,
Okay.
kind of like thinking handles that they could use while reading the stories.
I'm interesting.
Things like, this is a place where it's important to look for an alternative explanation.
Okay.
Or, this is a place where it's important to make a plan.
So they were giving them hints
Yeah, they were kind of giving them knowledge cues.
to help them spot those shortfalls.
Right.
Okay, so they had 4 conditions then.
They did.
Saliency and priming.
Mm-hmm.
Just saliency, just
Yeah.
priming.
Mm.
And neither.
Correct.
Okay, so what were the key takeaways from this study?
Well, one interesting finding was that priming those knowledge prompts,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't actually increase detection that much.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which suggests that simply lacking the knowledge of what to look for,
Right.
that wasn't the primary reason for the low sensitivity.
Okay, so it's not that they didn't know what a good argument should look like
Right.
or what a good decision-making process should look like.
Exactly. It was something else.
Okay, what else did they find?
They also found that when students did detect shortfalls on their own,
Uh-huh.
without any prompting,
Okay.
they were generally pretty good at explaining them.
Also, if they noticed the problem, they understood it.
They did.
The hurdle was just the noticing.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They found that making the shortfalls salient by underlining them,
Mm-hmm.
it actually sometimes decreased the quality of the students' explanations.
Compared to when they detected the shortfalls naturally?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it's like they were so focused on the underlined parts
Yeah, maybe.
that they weren't really engaging with the text as a whole.
That's possible.
And so their explanations weren't as good.
Yeah, they were more superficial.
That's fascinating. Why do you think that might be?
Well, the researchers speculated that the alertness, the active engagement that's required for in-the-wild detection,
Right.
that might act as a kind of internal priming.
Okay.
When you have to actively look for something,
Uh-huh.
you're already more mentally engaged,
Right. You're already thinking more deeply.
which might lead to a deeper understanding of what you find.
Whereas if it's just pointed out to you,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do that work.
Right, you're passively receiving the information.
And so your understanding might not be as robust.
Exactly. It's like the difference between being told the answer and figuring it out yourself.
Right.
When you figure it out yourself, you really own that knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
Okay, so what about their 4th study? What did they look at there?
So in their 4th study, they wanted to see if this sensitivity to thinking shortfalls was stable over time.
Okay, so does it change or does it stay relatively consistent?
Right, so they gave a similar instrument to 5th and 8th graders on 2 separate occasions a few weeks apart.
Okay, and what did they find?
They found pretty good stability in both the detection and discrimination scores,
Okay.
particularly for the 8th graders.
Okay, so as kids get older, their thinking dispositions become more stable.
That's what it seems to suggest.
Makes sense.
The correlations between the first and second test were pretty high.
So it's not just random fluctuation.
No, it seems like some people are just naturally more attuned to these thinking shortfalls than others.
And that tendency persists over time,
It does.
which lends support to this idea that thinking dispositions are real measurable things.
Absolutely. And, this is just one study.
Right.
There are many other researchers who have explored thinking dispositions from different angles.
Okay, so Perkins and his colleagues weren't the only ones looking into this.
No, not at all.
So what are some of the other perspectives on this?
Well, one really interesting example is the California Critical Thinking Dispositions Inventory, or CCTDI,
CCTDI.
developed by Peter Fascione and Noreen Fascione.
Okay, so what does the CCTDI measure?
So the CCTDI is a self-rating questionnaire
Okay.
that aims to measure an individual's inclination towards critical thinking.
Okay, so are they inclined to think critically? Or are they motivated to do so?
Exactly.
And how does the CCTDI relate to the triadic model?
Well, the triadic model emphasizes ability, inclination, and sensitivity,
Right.
whereas the CCTDI primarily focuses on inclination.
Okay, so it's more about the motivation aspect.
It is. It's about how strongly someone agrees with statements that reflect those critical thinking tendencies.
Okay, so what are some examples of those tendencies?
Well, the CCTDI looks at 7 subdispositions.
Okay.
Things like truth-seeking open-mindedness, analyticity, systematicity, critical thinking, self-confidence, inquisitiveness, and maturity of judgment.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It is. It covers a lot of ground.
So basically, it's looking at all the different facets of what it means to be a critical thinker.
Exactly.
And have they found that these inclinations are actually related to critical thinking skills?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
They found significant correlations between scores on the CCTDI and performance on critical thinking skills tests.
So the more inclined you are to think critically,
Right.
the better you actually perform on those tests.
That's what the research shows.
That's really interesting. And what about the connection to the triadic model's concept of sensitivity?
Well, Perkins and his colleagues actually administered the CCTDI to some of the students in their study,
Okay.
and they found a significant correlation
Okay.
between scores on the inquisitiveness scale of the CCTDI.
Which they describe as intellectual curiosity.
Right.
Okay.
And the student sensitivity scores.
Oh, wow. So the more intellectually curious you are, the more likely you are to notice those opportunities for thinking.
That's what the data suggests.
That makes sense. You know, if you're naturally curious, you're probably more likely to spot things that don't quite add up or situations where more thought is needed.
Exactly. You're more likely to ask questions to dig deeper.
To not just accept things at face value.
Right. To not just take the easy answer.
And you also mentioned the work of Stanovich and West.
Yes. Stanovich and West focus specifically on the disposition towards unbiased reasoning,
Okay.
particularly in the context of evaluating arguments.
So being able to look at an argument objectively, even if it goes against your own beliefs?
Exactly. And they argued that this is a crucial component of critical thinking.
Absolutely, because if you're only willing to consider arguments that support your existing views,
Right.
then you're not really thinking critically.
Just confirming your biases.
And how did they measure this disposition towards unbiased reasoning?
They used a bunch of different subscales
Yeah.
to assess different aspects of thinking style.
Like what?
Things like flexible thinking, openness to new ideas, and values the avoidance of dogmatism and absolutism.
Okay, so basically, are you willing to bend your thinking? Are you open to being wrong?
Exactly. And from all of those subscales, they created a composite score
Okay.
that they called actively open-minded thinking.
Actively open-minded thinking. I like that.
Yeah. And then they looked at how both cognitive ability,
Like IQ.
right,
And this actively open-minded thinking disposition predicted how well students could evaluate arguments.
okay, objectively independent of their own beliefs.
Got it. So they wanted to see if both smarts and open-mindedness mattered.
Right. And what they found was that both were important.
Both ability and disposition.
Both ability and disposition made unique and significant contributions.
To how well students evaluated arguments.
Yes, and importantly, their unique contributions were greater than the variance they shared.
Meaning that both what you can do and your tendency towards open-mindedness play distinct roles in how well you reason.
Exactly.
That's a really important finding.
It shows that it's not an either.
It's both.
It's both.
You need the ability and the disposition.
And the disposition.
Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the more general dispositions towards cognitive engagement that the Perkins paper touches on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like need for cognition, mindfulness, and entity versus incremental learners.
Yeah, these are really fascinating.
Okay, so let's start with need for cognition. What is that?
So need for cognition was first introduced by Cacioppo and Petty,
Okay.
and it refers to a person's tendency to seek out, engage in, and actually enjoy effortful cognitive activities.
So some people just like to think more than others.
They do. They find it pleasurable.
Okay.
And people who are high in need for cognition, they're drawn to complex problems. They like to think things through.
They like to analyze.
They do. And they're comfortable with ambiguity.
Okay, so they don't need everything to be black and white.
Not at all. They embrace the gray areas.
And how do you measure need for cognition?
Well, there's a scale called the Need for Cognition Scale,
Okay.
which is a self-report questionnaire
Okay.
where people rate how much they agree with statements about their enjoyment of thinking.
Got it.
And research has shown that need for cognition is a stable trait over time.
Okay, so it's not something that fluctuates a lot.
Right, it's pretty consistent.
And how does it relate to cognitive ability?
Well, it's only modestly correlated with things like IQ.
Oh, interesting. So you can be really smart and not have a high need for cognition.
You can, and vice versa.
Interesting. Okay, but how well does it predict behavior?
It's a good predictor of thoughtful behavior.
Yep.
In a variety of situations.
Like what?
Like carefully evaluating arguments, recalling evidence, really taking the time to process information.
That makes sense.
And interestingly, people who are high in need for cognition They both notice more opportunities to think, and they're more inclined to take those opportunities.
Okay, so they have both high sensitivity and high inclination in terms of the triadic model.
Exactly. They see the opportunities and they're motivated to seize them.
Wow, that's a powerful combination.
It is.
Okay, you also mentioned mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness is another really interesting one.
And we hear that term a lot these days.
We do, often in a meditation context.
Right, but is it the same thing here?
Well, in this context, mindfulness is a little bit different.
Okay,
It's more about a state of mind than a specific practice.
got it.
Ellen Langer, who's done a lot of research on mindfulness,
Hmm.
she defines it as an open and creative state of mind,
Okay.
where individuals actively create new categories,
Hmm.
consider multiple perspectives,
Yeah.
and are open to new information.
So it's about being flexible in your thinking.
It is about not getting stuck in old ways of seeing things.
And she contrasts mindfulness with mindlessness,
Right.
which is one.
Mindlessness is kind of being on autopilot,
Okay.
relying on automatic responses.
Not really thinking things through.
Exactly, and viewing things from a single narrow perspective.
Okay, so can you give us an example of the difference between mindlessness and mindfulness?
Sure. So imagine you're driving to work
Mm-hmm.
and you take the same route every day
Okay.
and you're not really paying attention.
You're just kind of zoning out.
Yeah, you're just going through the motions.
Okay, that's mindlessness.
That's mindlessness.
Okay.
But if you were being mindful, you might notice new things along your route.
Right?
You might consider alternative routes.
Okay.
You might be more aware of your surroundings.
So you're more present.
Exactly, you're more engaged.
And there's research that shows that even presenting information in a conditional way
Right,
can foster greater mindfulness.
it can.
Okay, so how would you do that?
Well, instead of saying, this is the case, you might say, this may be the case.
Okay, so you're introducing a little bit of uncertainty,
You are.
which forces people to think more carefully.
Exactly, and that can lead to better retention, better understanding, and more flexible use of that information.
Okay, so it's not just about the content of the information.
No,
It's about how it's presented
It is.
and how that presentation encourages a certain way of thinking.
Exactly. And while a lot of the research on mindfulness has focused on it as a temporary state,
Mhm.
there's also growing interest in understanding and cultivating mindfulness as a more stable trait.
Okay, so can you actually become a more mindful person in general?
That's the question. And there's some promising research suggesting that you can,
Through what?
through practices like perspective taking.